Thank you. So this is what the mural board looks like when you click on it, but it'll be zoomed in on the presentation once we start the presentation here in a minute or two.
And at any time, if you have any questions or technical difficulties, just enter them in the chat. We have people monitoring the chat and can try to provide answers to you, especially if it's technical difficulties. So. I think we're having any luck with Jeff's audio connection. So Derek, I might have to put you on the spot here.
It's all good. We ready?
I think so.
Right on. So first and foremost, just to say thank you to everyone for coming out tonight to our virtual workshop for the Ventura River Trail workshop. We've hired 2 outstanding consultant teams to kind of lead us through the process. And one of them is Pcld with Eric and Brianne. The other is Lynn Consulting with John Merrill. And I'll hand it over to you guys to introduce yourself. We're going to collect commentary tonight from you all. So that really helps us with these projects as far as making them successful. We want them to be community driven. We want the projects to come from the community. And so you taking your time out of your evening to come out and participate in this, very grateful for and appreciative. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Eric, Brianna, and John to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Derek. Really appreciate it. My name is Eric Berg. I'm a principal landscape architect with Pacific Coast Land Design. As he mentioned, I'm here with my fantastic team this evening, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But we're really excited to be a part of this project. We are kind of community-driven efforts here in Ventura, our home city. Love to be a part of these and hopefully make things like this rail trail become a reality. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Brianne to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Brianne Alton, and I'm an associate here at Pacific Coast Land Design. I'm tossed over to John.
Hi, my name is John Humphreys. I'm an associate with Pacific Coast Land Design, and I'll be kind of monitoring the board and helping some technical issues if you got any questions. But I'm going to probably mute myself and take myself off camera so nobody needs to see me.
Hey guys, my name's Angel. I'm a landscape designer here at Pcld, and I'll be providing translation services for today's meeting.
Perfect. Thanks, Angel. And John Merrill, you want to introduce yourself too?
So I'm John Merrill with Lynn Consulting, Senior Project Manager. I'm also a civil engineer and traffic engineer. And I just wanted to say one thing as we go into these types of meetings, viewing it from the end of someone from the public, is this is your trail. This is your project. We can all do all sorts of engineering, but at the end of the day, you're the ones telling us what you need. So we're really hoping to hear a lot from you today.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's really important feedback that we really want to hope to this exercise and meeting tonight will bring out those opportunities for you to give your feedback. With that in mind, definitely keep that sentiment in mind as you're going through this. We really want to hear from you about the things you want to see on this trail, what makes this trail the most usable for you, how will you use it, those sorts of questions. So we've designed a little activity and agenda here tonight that Brianne's going to start us off with to try and answer some of those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So tonight we're going to share more about the active transportation program by Caltrans. We're going to share a little bit about the Santa Paula branch line and the history and background of it, which this rail trail is a part of. We're going to do some fun activities in mural, like I mentioned. We're going to go over the goals of the ATP, community connections to the bike trail. We're going to talk about some proposed trail conditions, again, to get your feedback and your input for what you want in the trail. We're going to go over some proposed trail amenities and do some voting, and finally give you the opportunity to pledge your support for the project. A few helpful tips about Miro. We know that some of you are using this for the first time. These are drag and drop exercises. So anything that you're allowed to pick up and drag, you can pick up and drag. So there'll be objects like circles or stars that you can pick up and move around on the screen, that you can move to your desired element or location for voting. There will also be post-its that you can actually type into. Like John Humphreys mentioned, if you need any technical help, he's there in the Zoom chat for you. Please use the chat function if you need him. And then again, if you would rather just follow along with the presentation and fill out our simple Google survey, the link is provided here on screen. So that's available in the Miro board, and John's also going to put it in the chat for you. We want to make sure we get everybody's input. And Angel's going to go ahead and share this information in Spanish. Angel?
Hey, buenas noches todos, bienvenidos a esta junta sobre el Rail Trail de Ventura. Si necesitas ayuda con la traducción, utilice el chat en Zoom. Puedo interpretar y traducir sus comentarios para compartirlos durante la reunión. El siguiente ejercicio del tablero se ha traducido al español, pero si ha realizado una encuesta que se enfoca mucho en las actividades y ejercicios aquí, utilice la encuesta de Google en español para seguir, y ahí está para que lo hagan. Si necesitan ayuda técnica, utilice el chat en Zoom. Las preguntas y comentarios generales se llevarán a cabo hasta la parte de las actividades y habrá una sesión y preguntas de respuestas al final de la reunión. Las actividades son ejercicios de arrastrar y soltar. Utiliza el objeto provisto y colócalo en el elemento y ubicación para votar a proporcionar comentarios. Gracias.
Thanks, Angel. So why a Ventura Rail Trail and why now? So active transportation programs going through cycle 6. So this would be the funding source for the grant. This grant is due on June 15th. And so the city of Ventura is actively working on the application for the Ventura Rail Trail as part of the ATP. This project closes a gap or deficiency in our current active transportation network on the east end of Ventura and will provide new safe connections to existing community connection places. The grant program is competitive and it gives preference to projects with large impact potential in disadvantaged communities. The Ventura Rail Trail aims to benefit many pockets of disadvantaged communities along the Santa Paula branch line within the Ventura city limits. And if you want more information about what the ATP is and what they're seeking to do, you can, in Miro, you can click on the logo and that'll take you to the program website. So Santa Paula branch line is, it starts east of Piru and goes all the way to the Metrolink station here in Ventura. There are portions of the trail that have already been built. So these are the urban places throughout the trail, including Piru, Fillmore, so the yellow portion that you're seeing here on the screen, these are the built conditions, and Santa Paula Trail section.
And it's important to add right now, that the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail was provided as a master plan in the late 90s. And so really kick-started the efforts to eventually, hopefully, construct this entire trail along the Santa Paula Branch Line Trail. If you've ever been on the Santa Paula portions or the Fillmore portions, you'll notice something very kind of unique about this. This isn't a Rails to Trails project. This is a trail along a rail corridor. So it shares the rail corridor with the active rail line, which is kind of unique. And those portions are already built in Santa Paula and Fillmore and in Piru.
And some of these trail portions were built prior to VCTC buying the rail line. So the Fillmore portion was built in 1991. VCTC bought the rail line in 1995. In 1996, the Santa Paula branch line master plan was completed. And then since then, in 1998, there was additions to the Fillmore section. The Santa Paula section was built in 2005 through 2012. And then there's been 2 portions of the Piru section, phase 1 that happened in 2002 and 2008.
Perfect. Thanks, Brianne.
My pleasure. So the proposed Ventura Rail Trail is almost 4 miles. That's 3.91 miles between the existing Metrolink station here and the proposed trail head in East End Ventura. And we have gone ahead and put together a short flyover of the rail trail proposed alignment that Eric's going to talk about as it plays.
Yeah, thanks, Brianne. This will kind of give you a little bit of an overview, if you're unfamiliar, of the topography and where specifically the trail is being proposed in Ventura. As you can see here, the entire extent of the Santa Paula branch line trail. The Ventura portion is the last of the urban sections of the trail to be built. And hopefully, with the award of this grant, it will be leaving the agricultural open space lands left over. So starting on the west end, here's the Metrolink station. The trail follows the corridor and crosses Johnson, the Harmon Barranca, and then follows the agricultural corridor through unincorporated Soarland, as well as then crossing into the North Bank area. And before it kind of enters this area, oops.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
I can go ahead and go back.
You want to slow it down too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little fast. But crosses, here's the North Bank section. We'll talk a little bit more about these sections in a minute. Then there's the portion between Satakoy and Pettit that's largely behind residential before getting to Brown Barranca on the east end and eventually Wells Avenue and Satakoy. So that's kind of an overview of the trail segment to give people a better idea of where this is going. We'll talk more specifically about this portion this evening and what connections and how you can use the trail here in a minute, but we wanted to provide this so we have a little bit more of an overview of where the trail is.
Thanks, Eric. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first activity. We want to know which area of Ventura you live in, and you are able to zoom in on the map to get it more precise to your location. The map is obviously at very large scale, so no need to be super precise. So you pick up the dot that's here, and then you drag to your desired location. So those of you that are in the Miro board can go ahead and do that now. See Eric and Diana.
So again, there's a link to the Miro board in the chat. I see about 12 people in there. We'd love for as many people to use it as possible, but if not, we kind of mentioned before, the same kind of questions and answers will be available in the survey, which the link is also in the chat there. So it's a Google survey. So feel free to follow along if you can. If you want to just take the survey, that's completely okay too. Just wanted to engage in some of the exercises here tonight. There'll be some more kind of commenting exercises later that'll be really good if you can participate in. So feel free to try and use that link and get in here. It's a little new to a lot of people. Help me place the dot, please, Leslie asked in the chat.
So Leslie, okay. You're going to want to zoom in, click on the dot, and then drag it to your desired location.
Yep.
And you can zoom in and out if you're at a desktop. You can zoom in and out with a mouse on the map.
You can also on a tablet click and drag, kind of like you would zoom into anything on a tablet and grab that way if you're on a tablet. So far, see kind of a good dispersion of people in Ventura, across from East Ventura to West Ventura, some in Midtown, some in the hills. I want to know who's living at the very end of Arroyo Verde. I think I want to live back there.
And Lisa's got her hand up. Lisa, do you have a technical question? I can ask you to unmute. You have to unmute yourself, Lisa.
Okay, I think I found it. I'm having trouble getting onto this micro.com
on the Miro board
thing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't understand what we're supposed to do for that. I get online whiteboard, and then I get this board with like a whole bunch of stuff on it, and I don't know.
Yeah, you're in the right place. So we're going to go ahead and
you're in the right place.
We're going to use a function in the board that brings everybody to our current location on the board. So I apologize if any of you guys are scrolling around. We're going to force everybody to come here so Lisa can go ahead and find out where we are on the board.
Yeah, on the board, we're under activity number 4, the big number 4, if you're scrolling around, but I should have also brought everybody over to it. So
John, I see your comment that you don't live in Ventura. Where should you place your dot? You can just place it outside the boundaries that's in the direction that you live in. So if you live in Oxnard, you could kind of put it in that direction. If you live in Ojai, you could put it north of the Ventura Avenue. We know that people are interested in this trail that don't necessarily live within Ventura city limits, and we still want to know what direction you're coming from. Thank you for that.
Hi, just for information, it took me 20 minutes to get in. I can only get in on the phone. The Zoom will not allow me to sign in. And it says in a waiting room, and it canceled me out 5 times.
I'm sorry about that. If you want to go ahead and try to log back in on your computer, we can try that again. I apologize.
I've tried it 5 times. All it does is say it's connecting. And when I went into the phone line here, it says I was put in a waiting room and there were 40 participants. And the Zoom connection I have on my computer says connecting, but it won't connect.
I'm sorry to hear that. We've had a couple connection issues this evening. I don't see anybody in the waiting room right now.
Can you hear me now, Eric?
I can, Jeff. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So I had a similar issue. I restarted my computer, I think the second time, and it did work. So here I am. Sorry I missed the opening.
That's okay. Thank you for joining us. We got off.
Welcome, everybody.
Yep.
Sorry, I was going to do a little intro. I think Derek Towers took that. Appreciate that. So my name is Jeff Herford. I'm with the city of Ventura, principal transportation engineer. So just want to welcome you guys and super glad you guys are here. I know, sometimes at 6 o'clock after a work day, it's not something you want to do, but I'm glad you guys are participating, and it shows that we have a lot of interest in this project. And how about that flyover? I thought that was, I didn't see that in the prep, so I thought that was super cool. You guys added that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Well, I know some of you are still figuring out the dot exercise, but we're going to go ahead and move on for time purposes. Again, if anybody, I see that the dots aren't working for Christy either. If you're not able to do the exercise, we do have the Google survey version, which John can go ahead and post the link to that in the chat so everybody can give their feedback. It seems like we've run into a couple technical issues that we probably won't be able to figure out.
Yeah, and I will say, as a guide for using the dots, I find it best to zoom is really far in because they are kind of small, and then move them around is just a guide. It's a toss up between having really big dots that are easy to move around, but then you can't see where they're supposed to go, and trying to make it usable. So thank you for bearing with us on this.
So we'd like to go over, at this time, we'd like to go over the goals for the ATP. The project goal number 1 is to increase the proportion of trips accomplished by biking and walking. The second goal of ATP is to increase the safety and mobility for non-motorized users. The goal number 3 is to advance the active transportation efforts of regional agencies to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals. So you'll see some strategies for greenhouse gas reductions here in a moment. Project goal 4 is to enhance public health, including reduction of childhood obesity through the use of programs like Safe Routes to School. And again, we're going to show some of the connections to schools through the rail trail. Goal number 5 is ensuring that disadvantaged communities fully share in the benefits of the program. And goal number 6 is to provide a broad spectrum of projects to benefit many types of active transportation users. So our rail trail project is just one example of different applications that municipalities and regional agencies are applying for all throughout the state. So before moving on to our next activity, we're going to be using some icons on the map that represent different community connection types within proximity to the rail trail. So we'd like to go over them real quick just so we can kind of familiarize ourselves with them. These 2 in blue here are the train station and bus station. Purple icons will be fresh groceries, so access to fresh groceries either through like a supermarket or a food stand. The yellow represent educational items like libraries or schools. The pink icon represents places for medical help in the community. So anywhere you see those, they might be like a clinic or a medical center. Places of worship, there's a Hindu temple, a Buddhist temple, and a few churches that are within riding or walking distance to the bike trail, and also affordable housing developments that exist within our community.
Or will exist. Yeah,
or
several
will
that are being
exist.
proposed.
Yeah, some are in planning or in development, but don't currently exist fully yet. So we have this map here, and this map represents proposed project connections to community places. And so the dark blue, the thick dark blue line, that's the alignment of the proposed rail trail. And then we've got 3 circles that go around the circumference of the rail trail, and those represent a 10-minute walk. The second is a 5-minute bike ride or a 20-minute walk. And then the third is a 10-minute bike ride to the rail trail. So again, we're just looking at potential connection types. So ways that you could use the rail trail, maybe from getting from your house to one of these community connection places once it's constructed. And Eric's gonna go over about a few of the specifics that we're showing here on the map.
Yeah, thanks, Brianne. So highlighting in on this map, what we're really going to aim here for a second, we're going to do another exercise with this map where you're going to grab stars this time instead of little dots. But what we're really aiming to do is trying to figure out how, if this trail is constructed, you would use it. Highlighting key connection points. Would you use it to ride for recreation? Would you use it to ride to get to places? So highlighting a few of those key places and connection points for you. On the very west end of the trail, the Metrolink station, there's a couple proposed affordable housing components over there and the Moundwell School, as well as within walking distance, easy walking distance of the trail. This was kind of that first segment we showed in the flyover in the Montalvo area. As it moves further east, it goes through the unincorporated SOAR agricultural land into another area near Junipero Serra Elementary School, which is one of the kind of key community connection points. The trail will also connect to existing trails. I kind of glossed over one there, Brianne. It will connect up to the existing Harmon Barranca Trail, as well as key connection points at Montgomery, a proposed connection there at the Junipero Serra School, connections at Pettit. As you go further east, the city's previous successful application for Cabrio, a trail at Cabrio Village, will link up to the existing trails along the river. And then as you move even further east into Saticoy and some of the proposed affordable housing, both the Veterans project, which is under construction now, and some in Saticoy as well. So at this time, we're going to kind of zoom back out here, but we're going to try to engage people right below this map. I'll bring everybody to us. There's a whole bunch of stars you'll see. And so what I'd love for people to do that are engaging in the map is grab a star and try to put it on the map in places that you think this trail will incentivize you to get out and ride to go to. Destinations that you find like, oh, if they build this, it's going to be easier for me to get to the supermarket or to the school or to the Metrolink station, or essentially, how would you use this trail if it were constructed in Ventura? Got a few people in the waiting room.
And you can either put those stars next to the thing on the map that you're seeing that we're representing as either like a affordable housing development, a school, grocery store, or you can actually put them in the columns down below. So if you saw when we were going through the map that you could access one of the places of worship or a bus station by using the rail trail from your house, you can also put them in the columns below.
Kathy, I don't see a park as a destination. The parks are in green on there. So there's the Saticoy Regional Park. There's Barranca Vista. Some of them are smaller to label. So like Barranca Vista, for example, is located just north on the Harmon Barranca Trail. So the proposed Harmon Barranca Trail will connect to Barranca Vista. And you can see Community Park at Kimball is within a bike ride. However, there aren't great connections to get there. So there's some connection points, but there are parks shown here. We just didn't talk about them specifically. Lynn says, I live between Telegraph Wells and Foothill. Funny that there's no safe way to connect to any bike trail anywhere. That's a great point, Lynn. One of the pieces of this is a part of a larger active transportation planning effort that the city is going through right now also, that is trying to highlight better connection points throughout the city. So hopefully, if this is a huge, almost regional trail segment that can spur better connections as well as if it gets built. So trying to use this as kind of a spur point to build some of those connections. Getting east-west in Ventura on a bicycle or walking is very difficult because you're left with Foothill, Telegraph, Telephone, which are all busy arterial streets that aren't really safe or comfortable to ride bicycles on, or they don't feel that way. So this is a huge opportunity then, and then it's going to be about connecting north and south. and how do we get to places. So it looks like lots of community connection places a lot along the trail. People are putting stars everywhere on here. At this point, we'd love to open it up for conversation too. If anybody has any comments or questions about this, if you want to raise your hand, we can call on people. Where will the trail cross Johnson Drive? So the trail will cross Johnson Drive right where the railroad tracks cross Johnson Drive right now. There will be a designed crossing at that location. And that's one of the major north-south arterials that the project will have to get across. It's interesting, if you go to this trail segment in Santa Paula, you'll see it has to cross a lot of streets because that's the railroad literally runs through all the city streets in Santa Paula. This will be fortunate in the fact that the trail doesn't have to cross that many major arterials or streets in the city of Ventura. There's a few periodically along here, Johnson being one of them.
Hi, Lisa, we see your hand up. You can go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Yeah, I can't get to this whiteboard thing. I don't see a place to navigate. I'm in the Zoom screen with you on one side and the big and a small version of that screen doesn't allow me to do anything with it. So I don't know how I get back to, I don't see a minimize button or anything. So I don't know.
So the link in the chat should open up in a browser for you. So in the browser is where you would do the activities. I'm going to go ahead and paste the mural board link one more time in the chat. So it should open up a browser like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, and that's where you would use the mural board. If you're unable to use it, Lisa, I'm also going to paste again the survey link. So you could do the Google survey link, and the city of Ventura tomorrow morning is also going to post the Google survey link on their social media and website. So if you're unable,
it's so small I can't even see it. I don't.
So you can zoom in.
Yeah, but now I can't see what the icons are, so it's not working for me.
Okay, I
never
pasted,
mind. I'm sure somebody else in my neighborhood will be able to.
Can you add stars for her, Brianne, if she was to tell
Yeah,
you?
we can definitely add stars. You can see where the
Okay,
trail
what
is.
I'm supposed to tell you where.
If this trail were built, Lisa, where could you see yourself using it to get
using it?
Yeah,
just for recreation.
For recreation.
Just to ride. I mean, I don't even really. And how long is it?
It's going to be just shy of 4 miles.
Okay, so how is this? I mean, I would use it to get to. Like I can't even see the map. What streets these are?
Okay.
So it's not really helping to.
Is there a section of the map we can zoom in on for you, Lisa?
Well, I'd like to see where the end of I'm in Linear Park, so I'd like to see where the other end of it is.
Are you familiar with where the Metrolink station is? Near the 126 in Victoria? That's where the westernmost trailhead will be. That's where it will terminate, is near that Metrolink station.
Okay, so it's basically not really going anywhere for me.
Okay.
I mean, I might go to the Metro. There's a possibility if my sister visited, we might take the bikes to the Metrolink and go somewhere on Metrolink to go and, but I don't work anymore. So I don't have a, what I'd really like to be able to do is get from here to downtown without having to go on telephone or telegraph or some other street that has tons of traffic on it, or get to the harbor.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kind of things that are for recreation. Ride my bike to the 4th of July thing. That's the kind of things that I'm looking for.
Got it. Well, that's important too. Recreation is also an important use of the trail. So that's important.
I for exercise. I mean, if it was, at some point in the future, when it's longer, at the beginning, I didn't really understand what you said about connecting to a Santa Paula section.
So this is one part of a future trail that could connect all the way
Okay.
to Santa Clarita through Santa Paula. The
Okay.
section east of Ventura has not been built yet, but this is a critical piece. That's over 60 miles of trail. That's going to take a long time for it to get built, and that's kind of a way to think of this, right? Is the first step in many legs. I mentioned a little bit
Okay.
the city's ongoing active transportation that is looking at ways of building off of this to get you to the harbor or to downtown. So this is just one very important piece. These projects are so expensive that you kind of have to tackle them in piecemeal fashion, right? So this is a huge opportunity to tackle almost 4 miles of a large east-west connection.
Yeah, we have another question, Christy.
Yep. I see Christy has her hand up. Christy, you can go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so the trail is on the south side of the tracks, right?
We'll look at the sections here in a second,
Okay.
but there's different alternatives. Primarily, the majority of it will be on the south side.
So will there be new railroad crossings to get to the south side of the tracks? Like if you're in, most of the neighborhoods, you got cross the tracks to get there.
Exactly.
So will there be new crossings?
Everywhere here you see that the dashed lines on the map are proposed new crossings. Everywhere that is solid actually already has existing crossings in place to get across the railroad tracks.
Okay, so the grant covers those new at-grade crossings? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, good question.
The more the better.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat from Tina. She says, will it be lighted up for nighttime safety?
We're going to talk a little bit about the trail amenities in just a second, Tina. That's very, very good. So I'm not going to give it away yet, but it's one of the proposals that we're talking about. So. And I just pasted again the Google Forms survey in the chat, and I'm sharing the link to the mural board again. We've had some later joinees that may not have gotten that link. We're seeing lots of stars on the map, and apologies for the technical difficulties. These interactive map exercises, it's still a little difficult and new to us to try and figure out the best way to get to get input. So thank you for bearing with us as we're working our way through this. All right. So next we're going to talk about some alternative sections, which will answer some of those great questions that came up about which side of the railroad tracks will the trail be on? Will there be lighting? And I'm going to kick it back over to Eric to go over those. Yeah, thanks, Brianne. So the graphic that you see on your screen in the presentation right now is showing the whole length, and what we've kind of divided it into 4 basic sections that we're going to look specifically at typical sections. A is the Montalvo area, where we largely have residential on the north and either industrial or agricultural on the south. Then there's section B, which crosses Bristol into the unincorporated kind of SOAR agricultural land. It's actually the County of Ventura land, back into the city of Ventura at C. And we call this the North Bank section. It'll parallel the wide portion of North Bank Drive between Montgomery and essentially the connection to Junipero Cerro School. And then that's opposed to section D, which again is kind of in the North Bank Cabrio Village neighborhood, where it's going to be behind people's backyards, like existing walls. It's a little bit more private in that location because of the existing makeup of the railroad infrastructure. So we're going to go down and look at these typical sections, starting with section A. And what we really want to get here is these are different design ideas that are being explored. A lot of these are sympathetic to or in concert with some of the original proposals in the Santa Paula branch line master plan from the early 90s, with some additions. So what we're really interested here is to talk about section A. This is the area where you can see some of the industrial on the southern end. It's actually a smaller right-of-way, railroad right-of-way in this area. What's kind of typical here is that you see the railroad is still in place, and there's about 15 feet of separation, at least, as long as there's a fence there between the trail and the path. The path proposed is a 12-foot wide multi-use path, which is wider than the Ventura River Trail and or the Coast Trail, which are about 10 feet. So it's of ample width. And some of the proposed solutions along here that you're going to see, a few of these repeated, are lighting. We just talked about that, so I kind of gave it away. But one of the ideas is to add lighting along here, either solar lighting or electric lighting. There's great new solar fixtures that we're actually exploring with the city of Ventura on another project across town that can kind of pave the way for this, as well as the idea of using areas along here to treat runoff from the trail itself, which will be a requirement. So before I move on to the next thing, what I'm really curious is, and I'd love to open it up for people to raise their hands, but on the left here, you can see triangles or little sticky notes. And what you can do in the board is you can take a triangle and put it on something you really love in the image, or leave a note down below about something you wish you could see in here. And so go ahead and kind of follow along there and feel free to add those. You don't have to follow necessarily with me as I go to the next one, but I kind of explained this one and I'm going to start on the next one. Feel free to kind of follow behind me as I'm moving along here. But really what we want to get is your input on what you want to see.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and say we are going to go through several of these, and we're going to hold question and comments until the end of this section, so we can have a robust conversation about this. So if you're not able to use the Miro app correctly, but you want to be able to give comments and questions, we just ask that you keep yourself muted and then raise your hand. It'll be about 10 minutes or so. Bear with us. Thank you.
So that's largely the existing condition in the Montalvo area. Next, we're going to talk about that portion that runs through the agricultural, or section B. This is where you have agricultural on both sides, and Bristol Drive is 2 lanes on the south side of the trail. So in this segment here, we have a couple of opportunities with what we could do with the area in between the trail and Bristol Drive. The first section explores landscape alternatives that would provide shading around a seeding node and maybe a drought tolerant hydro seed mix with some wildflowers, kind of a cost effective way to treat a long segment of this trail. The way this grant is structured is landscape alternatives don't offer, most of the grant is going to go to the hard engineering of it, and it's actually kind of written into the grant the way they can spend money. So we're going to have to look at ways of providing sporadic trees and shade throughout, but maybe not trees all the way up and down this initially. So as you notice, the first one in the Montalvo area didn't have any trees. One of the reasons is it's a smaller section, and a lot of the existing houses to the north have trees that overhang. So there's kind of this perception of trees, whereas we may be able to maximize more tree canopy further east in the section. This is one of those locations. So that's the first kind of way of looking at section B. Another way, just to the right of that, looks at that area in between the trail. The trail doesn't move. It stays really close to the railroad tracks, or as close as it can be, but looks at that segment off of Bristol for bioinfiltration again. Bristol is a prime example of how we can maybe collect and treat not just the runoff from Bristol or from the path, but also from Bristol Drive, which doesn't have a curb right now. Tremendous opportunity to use that landscape area to capture and collect and treat runoff before it ends up in our barrancas or in the rivers and the ocean.
So again, feel free to leave comments
notes and comments on these. Thanks, Brianne.
On both of these alternatives. So you can leave dots by the things that you're most excited about and drop notes down below about what you like about these options. And we're going to go now on to our location C, which is North Bank Drive.
And another big thing to mention here is if there's something we're missing, ideas that you have, feel free to leave those in the comments here too. This is by no means exhaustive of everything there can be along the trail, but we're just trying to get a feel for how it could go. So, so section C is what we're calling the North Bank section. Sorry, I see that the people are putting comments, but they're going behind things. So there was a stacking order. It should be better now if you tried to put your comment and it kind of disappeared on you. I saw one of those happen. So the section C has North Bank to the south, but in this section, it's only about 2 blocks long, 2 or 3 blocks long. North Bank is a 5-lane road with a turn lane in the middle, parking on both sides, and already a class 2 bike path along the road. So in this portion, we actually have considerable landscape room. If you drive by this right now, it's nothing but grass. You just see the railroad along there. I should have provided pictures of the existing condition along here so you can see what it looks like now if you're not familiar. That opportunity, if we hug the trail closer to the railroad, creates this kind of large buffer space where we could provide drought tolerant hydro seed, intermittent shade trees, very similar to what you saw in option B. That as opposed to The one just to the right of this, which is kind of a second option, if the trail moves just a little bit further away from the railroad tracks, but not right up against the street, you could provide street trees still, and you could provide places for something like exercise stations, kind of getting to that comment about outdoor recreation and using this trail as a recreation. So a way to bolster that, some place where you could have outdoor fitness equipment along there. A lot of the same kind of landscape feel. This one you could provide, maybe this is an area where we can provide more consistent shade tree canopy along here to help shade the mass amounts of paving that exist on both sides. The last section for section C, this kind of North Bank area, is what if the trail meandered as opposed to staying straight, and kind of varied between the roadside or the roadside or the rail side of it. Things like a shade structure could be built in a very key location. This is one of the areas where a new connection that connects to Junipero Serra Elementary School and Junipero Serra Park exists. And so maybe enhancing that connection by some more open space amenities here, something similar to a linear park along here might be something to consider.
Okay, and those are our options for C. Remember to give your feedback throughout. And then we're going to leave some time after we go through the alternatives as well for people to continue giving feedback. Now we're going to go to location D, and this is the East End walled residential typical.
Thanks, Brianne. This is the condition that largely exists between Satakoy Avenue on the east and Pettit on the west, where the trail, and even further west than that, where the trail is largely between back walls of people's residences. It's a little less visible back here. It goes a long distance between those arterial connections. So in here, you're going to see much sparser planting, but intermittent trees still. And maybe the idea of emergency call boxes. There's actually emergency call boxes on portions of the Santa Paula branch line trail that have very similar. I don't know how frequently they're used, but may give some more security in portions of the trail that are a little less visible. Another thing that's key to mention is the trail will also be, it's wide enough to act as access for rail maintenance, but also I'm seeing someone put something about emergency vehicles. Emergency vehicles will be able to access the trail. I'm sure that's a keen factor of the trail design. So
Eric, can you go ahead and select all those objects and bring to the front? I think we've got a stacking order issue here as well, where things are going behind the image. Sorry about that, everybody.
I'll do that here.
Will you lasso like the image too, and then just deselect the image? Because I think some people have dropped stuff, but it's gone behind the image.
Well, it's locked, so I don't think.
So if you were having, folks, if you were having problems before getting your objects on the image, that should be working now. Okay, and then before we wrap up and take some questions or comments about these different alternative options, Lynn Consulting put together these bridge crossing examples. So at Harmon Barranca, there's one of those new proposed bridge connections, which will take the trail over the Barranca. And so this is some proposals of what that bridge might look like. So again, we're looking for your feedback of what you like about these images, and if you have any ideas of how you think it could be improved. And so I'm going to zoom out overall on these different alternatives that we showed. And if anybody has comments or questions about what's going on in these different images, if there's anything that we can clarify, feel free to put things in the chat or use the raise your hand function in Zoom. Todd, I see that your hand's up. I'm going to ask you to unmute. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, following the images, it seemed like the trail moved from one side of the railroad in section A to section B. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It has to start, the link at the Metrolink station is on the north side, on the west end. And so at some point it's going to have to cross the trail, and that crossing, there's a few alternatives of looking at where that can happen. One of them is one potential solution is at the Harmon Barranca already, where there already is a existing crossing.
Okay, I just didn't see that, so I was wondering how you're going to handle that. So I'm also wondering, you don't have what I would call section E Edwards, the final link, across this through probably the most difficult area through the Satico industrial area is the reason you didn't have a detail on that area.
Yeah, because I think that's the most unknown at this portion. There's a lot of alternatives of how to get both to and across wells that are being explored, and maybe initial alternatives with long-term. It's also cross-jurisdictional. Across wells is the county of Ventura, so we're looking at ways of merging that and making sure that we can get there, or that the trail can get there at least immediately with maybe a phase 2 that gets across wells. So I think that's the difficult section. There are also 2 major projects that are potentially coming in there. The Ventura Veterans Project right on the east end. And then there's the Brown Barranca too, which is also a difficult barranca to cross. So that's a good comment, Todd. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you for this.
Okay.
I understand why you didn't include it. My last comment was, since we do have a trail somewhat analogous to this on the Ventura River, I guess I'd urge you, the designers, to ride that, look at it, study it, and see what works, what doesn't work. I've noticed the log fencing tends to deteriorate, and is there some alternative fencing might be more durable, less maintenance, so those kind of things. So I'd urge you, whatever you can pick and learn from the Ventura River Trail and apply that to this segment would be helpful.
That's a great comment. We actually worked with the city of Ventura on a recent Caltrans grant also to help repave that trail, that they were successful, and that should be coming soon. So we know that trail very well. And that's a great comment on the fencing. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd. I want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that these images look really finished, right? We go to 3D software to make this look really realistic, but this is a very preliminary part in the project. So at this point, we do want to hear ideas like what Todd's sharing, because this is like pre-design. So this is just to get your feedback. That's what these designs are for. And then the application really talks about need, and it talks about what the community is asking for in the project. There's many other processes or parts of the design to come if the city of Ventura is to be awarded the ATP grant for the Ventura Rail Trail. So again, super preliminary. We'd love to hear all the comments. I did want to read a comment from the chat, and that's from Nina Danza. She said, Section C must have a strategy for graffiti control. Please, cannot get a note on the whiteboard. She's having trouble with the mural, but thank you, Nina. We got your comment. And then Barbara asked if there will be water fill stations. So in our next session, Barbara, you'll be able to vote on amenities, and a water bottle fill-up station is one of the amenities that we have for voting. And I'd like to toss it over to John McNally next. He's had his hand up.
Yes, hi, thank you. Hey, I was taking off on what Todd said. I was wondering if you've met with and collaborated with the Friends of Santa Clara River and the Santa Clara River Parkway, because they did a presentation. It sounds like there's a lot of overlap.
Thanks, John. That's a great comment. This project has reached out for kind of support from the Friends of the Ventura River. They're a keen supporter along here.
Eric, John was asking about Friends of the Santa Clara River, not the.
Yeah. I get them crossed up. We just worked with the Friends of Ventura River on the Ventura River Trail. So sorry about that. We are reaching out for letters of support and conversations about the trail to the Friends of the Santa Clara River. But that's a great, excellent point, John.
Eric, I can dive in real quick on this too.
Yeah.
With the Cabrio Village trail gap closure, we actually did do quite a bit of work with the Santa Clara River organization at getting that through, and they're very supportive. In fact, one of the reasons why we wanted to get that gap in and get that money is it was a shorter segment, easier to implement. That's a shorter burn. This is going to be a more longer term type of project. So this is something that might take several years to get in. But yeah, and you know, we've worked with them in the past, and I'm sure that they're supportive of this. In fact, I think we've already reached out to them.
Yeah, I was going to say, Nina, I think, and correct me, Derek, if I'm wrong, but she already sent a letter of support for this project.
Yep, that is correct. She's with the Ventura chapter of the Sierra Club Jim Danza is with the Friends of Santa Clara River, who we work with for the Cabrio Trail. And just to kind of say, in this long-term working with them, you know, these are two separate paths, but they're serving similar functions and provide, you know, a loop type network for recreational riders, as well as opportunities to get to the river sections from a greater portion of the city.
And we have quite a few comments in the chat.
Yeah, and there's a couple of people who still had their hands up and have for a while, and people are starting to put some stuff in the comments question wise. So
okay, John, would you like to read? Yeah, John, do you want to read some of those comments from the chat? Thank you.
Yeah, just real quick, somebody mentioned about the graffiti, saying could possibly have murals along them, any talented artists in the area. So I think that's a good comment there. And then someone was asking, since there'll be trails likely used by walkers from nearby residential areas, how are the walkers and cyclists being managed harmoniously?
That's a good segue into some of our voting elements. There is an option to vote on separated biking and walking pathways. So if that's something that you're passionate about or you're interested in, make sure to give us that feedback.
And another thing along those lines too, as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of these sections, is that the 12-foot wide trail segment is actually a couple feet wider than the 10-foot that's in the master plan and some of our existing 10-foot wide trails, which should help with some of that. Although bicycles, I know I ride an e-bike around town and I ride it actually on the beach path. Bicycles and pedestrians are kind of a difficult thing. I think it's an education piece too, and an important one to make sure that bicycles are aware of pedestrians. It's meant to be a multi-use path that people can enjoy for all types of outdoor recreation and or transportation.
And we have thank you, Eric. We've got two more hands up, Mark and then Marie. If you guys could each take about 30 seconds with your comment, because we have to move into the next activity, but I want to make sure that we get to hear from you. So Mark first.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. I'm just saying that along North Bank in Bristol, maybe implementing some type of like concrete bollards along the street just to make sure that in case cars swerve off, I know there's drunk drivers, regardless if you want them to be there or not, or just speeding in general, just keep the cyclists and the pedestrians safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. And Marie's hand went down, but Marie, feel free if you're there.
I don't know why my hand went down. I still have a question. So I just did the whole Google Earth thing with this, and it's crossing some really busy streets. Not that I didn't already know this. So what is your plan for getting bicyclists across these busy streets? That's my question.
That's a good question. I'm gonna let John Merrill speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So, you know, crossing busy streets is always a very difficult thing. One of the more touchy locations is at Bristol, where not only is there a rail crossing, but there's also a curve there. And so we are proposing to put in a type of signal called a hawk signal or a pedestrian hybrid beacon. Actually, the city's just getting ready to install, and I think it's the first one on Telephone Road. And I'm sorry, Telephone Road, just to the west of Victoria. And what it is it's a signal that's not on all the time. It's very similar to when you have like a fire truck or at a fire station where it's actuated by the fire department. Instead of a fire department, it's actually somebody pushing the button to cross as a bicycle or a pedestrian. So that's one of those particular situations that we're exploring to implement in those locations. We have to do something that's called a warrants. We can't just put a signal in everywhere. So it has to be warranted by meeting certain traffic conditions, crash conditions, things like that. So it's all part of that engineering thing that would happen later on as the project is being developed a little bit more. But we have a lot of tools in the toolbox.
I'll just add to that real quick. There's one up on the 33 through Casita Springs. There's a hawk signal there. So if you've driven up to Ojai, Oakview, you'll pass through on there. So that's what we're proposing.
Okay,
And-
thank you.
And one of the things I also noted kind of early is the nice thing about this is it doesn't cross every street, right? The east side of Ventura already has kind of a pretty strong arterial, and the railroad tracks are already providing the separation. So there are actually long distances in between those crossings, sometimes, especially in that section D from Saticoy all the way to the other end, and in excess of a mile or so. So it's not like you're going to be having to stop and cross every 10 seconds or something like that.
And Montgomery already has an existing signal, so that'll be helpful as well.
So at this time, we've kind of planted the seed with this next activity a few times. We want to hear from you on options for proposed trail amenities. So everybody can vote up to 4 times for their top 4 amenities. So again, if separated bike and walking path is something that's really important to you, where you'd like to have walkers have their own lane and bicyclists have their own, you can go ahead and drag and drop a triangle over to that portion. Again, you can use the Post-its to write comments. And if there are any other ideas that we haven't put on the board, we'd like to hear those too. Because again, this is your project and we want to know what you folks would like in the Ventura Rail Trail. And while we work on that, I'm going to go ahead and go back over to the chat to read a few more comments. Todd Collart said public art can serve to reduce graffiti. The mural in Piru might be a useful case study. Steve Offerman said for the Johnson crossing, it's worth considering locating the crossing at the existing traffic signal or short distance south of the railroad. Using this full traffic signal would provide the safest crossing and also least interference with this busy street. It would only require a short detour of the street along the right of way of Johnson. Thank you, Steve, for your comment. Todd Collart said the walking and cycling times in the radiating lines around the route seem questionable when traveling to the Oxnard location because they can only reach Oxnard via the 101 bridge or the 118 bridge. As the crow flies times does not apply. You're correct, Todd. That was a offset, was more about distance. And of course, you know, we can't just magically fly across the Santa Clara River into Oxnard. It was more to serve as an offset into our Ventura city limits. But of course, yeah, it would take longer to get onto the Oxnard sides. So we apologize for the lack of nuance in our graphic there. But thank you.
I think it's an important note to be made about potential connections to Oxnard. So that connection that we talked about at Harmon Barranca will hit up with a trail there that, in theory, again, with some more work in the future, could provide connections over the bridge into Oxnard, better connections over the bridge. And again, on the other end of the project at Wells, the existing bridge there, I know it's a major arterial, but getting across the river at those 2 locations is possible for people in Oxnard or the outside Oxnard region.
A great point,
I
Eric.
guess to that point, even Victoria, which isn't that far from the Metrolink station. So future projects, yes, future connections, but really excited about that Harmon Barranca potential connection, because that one doesn't need much to potentially link up to the bridge and get over to the collection or River Park. I see some people drawing on the screen. I'm trying to kind of capture those comments in our boards and our notes, and then I'm clearing them. It's not to take away your comments. I know that some people know that feature, and so note that we are taking those as notes. That last line I saw was probably a connection through the ag field, some way to get to the south is a proposed connection. So thank you for that.
Are there any other comments at this time? We could take a few more comments before we move on.
I guess one of the things I want to address here as we're waiting for people to potentially raise their hands is that there were a couple comments about water filling stations. So you can see them, water bottle filling stations, maybe bike repair stations here. We didn't show all of these amenities in those sections, so kind of left some of it for this, is the idea that, yes, there's a lot that could happen along these at little nodes along the trail, and ideas about, structuring shade and other opportunities around those nodes where they do happen. So far, lots of votes for trees, art, wayfinding, lighting, a lot of votes for trash cans. Were there, someone asked, I guess John Darling asked me in a direct question, will there be any Port-A-Potties or public restrooms? At this point, there aren't any proposed. That's a good comment though to put in here. The city is also always, keen on trying to provide those where needed. So, maybe at trailheads, there might be public restrooms, of course, at the Metrolink station, and maybe even the East End and trailhead public restrooms might be available.
If the North Bank section took on more of a linear park type aesthetic, like what's proposed here in C2, I could see there potentially being something like a Portland Loo.
Yeah. And so, yes, all of your comments in the chat are being saved. We consider those, just as important as any votes or any comments on the Miro board, since I know many of you had technical difficulties. We really appreciate you sticking with us through this. So.
And feel free to keep filling out the proposed trail design amenities voting and leaving us comments. But at this point, we want to give everybody an opportunity to pledge their support for the project. There's also an opportunity in this form. So I'm going to click on it just so everybody sees what this link looks like. It's just asking if you support the project. If you have any other comments, maybe you have a special interest in the project or you have special concerns because you live near the proposed rail trail, this is your opportunity to give us that more long answer. And so please feel free to do that here. And then there's an opportunity to include your email address so we can go ahead and respond back to your comments. And so you're being heard and answer any questions that you might have that you weren't able to get answered tonight, as well as add you to city mailing list so you can get updates about the project as we find out about the success of the application. We're gonna, John went ahead and put that in the chat. Thank you, John. And at this time, Eric, can you go ahead and run? So we are going to leave a little bit more time for Q&A, but we want to check in and see if there's anybody that entered the meeting late and wants us to go ahead and return to some of the information that we went over earlier on in the presentation, just to make sure that we leave time for that.
Brianna, the polls and quizzes isn't available for me. You want to try? I might have to make you host.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll now. So it's just as simple. It should just pop up on your screen. Would you like the presentation to be repeated? Yes or no thanks? You're ready for Q&A.
I know that many of you joined late and maybe looking for kind of a cap or a recap of what happened at the beginning of the presentation. We're happy to kind of start from phase one and walk through this again for anybody who joined late, but we're also going to entertain public comment here too as well, just because we know people's times are limited. We also really appreciate everyone taking time out of their Wednesday evening to join us. Know that these times aren't easy for a lot of people, but especially when it's as gorgeous outside as it is here in Ventura tonight. So thank you for sticking with us on this virtual forum to learn a little bit more about this fun project.
So we do have a few people that are interested in us returning to portions of the presentation. So we're going to go ahead and take maybe 10 minutes for general Q&A. There's a few other questions that we'd like to put out there. And then for those of you that entered the meeting late, hang on. We're going to go ahead and restart portions of the meeting and answer any clarification questions that you might have missed. I'm going to end that poll now. So I know we wanted to ask about community connection. So previously we had somebody brought up parks. I think it was Kathy Bremer brought up that parks weren't necessarily an iconography. So that's a potential community connection that maybe, if you live over near Ventura Springs, you could hop on the rail trail and then go to the park space that's adjacent to Junipero Serra. Are there other community connections that we didn't include in the map here? So something other than libraries or schools or housing or places of worship that you would use the trail to get to? You can use the chat or raise your hand, or if there's something else you want to talk about, feel free to raise your hand. And we are also curious that if you'd like more community connections around the trail. So do you think the trail provides a good opportunity to add more affordable housing in our community or other community connection types? Mark Martinez said mostly bus routes and Metrolink access, so using the trail to get to bus routes and the Metrolink. And then John said potentially to connect to Kimball Park. That's fantastic. Sierra shared that she thinks that the trail could provide connection to the Saticoy Farmers Market and at Saticoy Park. Jeff Morris says connect to the north side of the freeway over Saticoy Avenue into the park. So great, people are looking at the trail as a potential connection in and out of Saticoy. That's fantastic.
Yes. One of the proposed trailhead locations is potentially right near Saticoy Park, so it could be a great transition there.
I wanted to touch on something that we had talked about a little bit before, and I noticed a lot of stars that were down here by the bus stops and the train station, and also even across the river in Oxnard. There's some, at least a couple of stars around some of the transfer points. That's really important. Those kind of connections are very important, and if somebody here would like to speak on that, that's something that we'd really like to hear more about.
Thanks, John.
Nina shared that she would love to leave opportunity for small trailside businesses like food trucks. So again, the opportunity alongside North Bank for where there's more space, that might be a good location for that. And then Christy shared that it's important to have an easy bike connection with Kimball Park.
Yeah, one of the things, as I look at this from a really high level that I see an immediate opportunity for is potentially in that North Bank section there, where North Bank is already 5 lanes wide. There's parking on both sides of North Bank, and there's already a class 2 bike lane on Saticoy, especially on the north side. So it seems to me, from my outside looking in, that we've got a lot of transportation in this corridor now. Are there opportunities to use that space to enhance what this trail could be in there and create kind of a local node in this? Like I said, maybe a linear park. What does that space want to be in the future? So just interesting ideas that instantly come out when you start to look at this.
And Nina's got her hand up. Nina, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, yeah. Like I have a couple of thoughts besides the small business. There is similar examples of that down on the LA River, for example, but I have 2 kind of major connections that we're not thinking about. One of them is the Levis Park Drive Extension Project.
Great one.
Yeah, I don't have a super good picture in my head of how this would connect, although I'm sure Jeff and Derek do. But
Johnson Drive.
Correct. You'd have to get on Johnson to do that. Correct. But
well, no, you could. I think you can get on Harmon Bronca and go all the way down and tie into Johnson.
Yes. Yes.
There's a new signal going in at the new development there, the Willows.
Yes.
And then there's going to be a 2-way cycle track on the west side of Johnson going down to, well, then you can get on the bridge that way to go over to Oxnard. But then eventually you can come down Johnson and then tie into the Levis Park extension, which will have a multi-use trail.
Yes. Okay. So as long as you've got that in your head and keeping that, vision of, how we're going to do this 5 and 10 years away, I love it. That's all of us out here on the east side of town. We want to get to the beach.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the things. So a Levis extension, and then the ATP project, the citywide kind of ATP look has already looked at potentially adding, down a Levis Park further to get to the harbor, right? So
that's the key.
That's the key, right? Is that tricky section there from Victoria to all the way to harbor? How do we get down that section, and then you're at the harbor? But it's doable, and this is a key. That Harmon Branca connection is such an important one making that dream become a reality, I think.
I was going to even say the connection to the community park with Harmon Branca is important as well.
Exactly, going north, right? So there's portions of Harmon Branca that can take you up right now to Branca Vista, and then can we get through the next portion just north of Branca Vista to get to the park? Is there already a trail along that portion?
Yeah, there's a trail there. Yep, there's a trail there.
So Harmon right there is a huge connection point, right? At Harmon Branca, you can connect all the way up to Community Park.
Okay, and then the other connections I would like to just explore with you maybe at another time is with what we're Sierra Club is and Friends of Santa Clara River are still underway with a feasibility study for a North River side trail. So it's different from this trail. It's called the Santa Clara River Loop Trail. We've been with the National Parks staff person now. I think we're in our third or so years, just overloaded. And I probably should, I would request to sit down sometime with this group or this, consulting firm, just to give you some, thoughts, how can, if there's some interface, how should we best interface? There's slightly different projects. I think this Santa Paula branch line is shown in our feasibility study as an alternative. It's not a river experience. However, it gets people where they want to be. So it's not fulfilling exactly what we want, but perhaps there are some gateways. This trail, this Santa Paula branch line trail, for example, at Montgomery, there's a really, really good opportunity to connect to this rail right at Montgomery and drop into a river, a North Bank River Trail. It's part of it's already there.
Right.
Okay, and it's at the dead end of the existing trail dead ends at its west terminus, further west.
The west end. Yeah.
Right at Montgomery, further west, all the way, keep going west. Past Potomac, correct, right there.
Yep.
That's where our trail dead ends now. If we could connect to the rail trail, and it's a 50 feet, it's not very far at all.
Right.
We would be able to drop down onto the north bank of the river on a Santa Clara River Loop Trail, more of a river experience. That's Nature Conservancy property. We are in discussion with them. Actually, we have a pretty green light that they will agree to put a trail down there, providing it meets their mission. Okay. And this is a feasibility level that we're looking at. So yes, we can get to the river. It would be just fabulous for parks. We have a lot of things, to overcome and hurdles and things to solve to do this kind of thing. But if the Santa Paula branch line trail goes, we need to connect to it. It needs to have some good, right at Montgomery is a perfect example of what we should be talking about with you.
Yeah, I think you nailed it as the kind of the two different experiences, the river trail being maybe a more recreational nature-based trail, but this trail is really, it's a transportation backline for all active transportation.
Right.
Right. Like it's a way to get to all of these. It is essentially your 5-lane road, but it's for bicycles and people instead. That gets you from point A to point B a little faster and provides you connections to all the things you want to do along the way, and that trail being one of them. So that's very important, Nina. And yes, we'd love to make sure we connect.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Nina. There's a few more comments in the chat before we go back to the beginning of the presentation and reshare some of that information. John shared, let's dream, walk us through continuing bike path to the fairgrounds. So again, that idea that Nina brought up about connecting the east side down to the beach and to the fairgrounds. Lisa Fox shared, this solves the problem I've been contacting our local county and city reps about, the dangerous biking and walking conditions between Montgomery and the packing plant. Thanks. Barbara shared, for those who want to use this for recreation, could there be a place to park your car, then take the bike trail. So yes, Barbara, at both locations, the start and end, so starting at Metrolink station, this would be considered a park and ride location. And then again, on the east side, either just past Wells Drive, the location hasn't been solidified or determined yet, but there would be a location there also for park and ride, so that folks could use this as a park and ride recreation trail.
And I also think there's an opportunity, it may not be a formal trailhead, right in the middle at that kind of North Bank connector point. There's a lot there. There's existing parallel parking on the road. There's opportunities there for a potential mid kind of almost park and ride, because I don't think the parking on the north side of North Bank is heavily used. Go ahead, I was to say, my wife, who's attending this meeting, sent me a private chat asking me to explain what ATP means. For those who might missed it, we've used that acronym a lot tonight. ATP stands for Active Transportation Plan or Program. So that's what we've talked about. The city, this is a active transportation program grant that the city is applying for. And we've kind of mentioned it in parallel with an active transportation plan that the city is also going under at the same time. Both are Caltrans projects that fund active transportation, which generally means walking, bicycling, and alternative transportation.
Bert shared that Kimball Park, using the Harmon Barranca to connect to the rail trail, could be an additional parking location. Thanks, Bert. There's a lot of parking there at Kimball Park, Kimball Community Park.
Especially now with the new entrance there.
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to invite those of you that are on that want to continue on for conversation to stay on, but we are going to go ahead and go through the information that we've already shared this evening and take additional comments and questions. Please feel free to use the chat to leave any other comments, or go to the Pledge Your Support form if you have any long comments that you'd like to share. And we're going to go ahead and restart the presentation at this point. So just to recap, the things that we have shared thus far that we're going to share again is a little bit more background on the Active Transportation Program. What is the Santa Paula branch line? When did it start? How did it come to be? What are some of the goals of the state's ATP? What are the community connections that exist around the bike trail, and what are your ideas for community connections? What are the proposed trail conditions and proposed trail amenities? And we're going to be brief with some of these topics. So if you're somebody that came into the presentation late and you have specific questions about clarification, please feel free to raise your hand or put those questions in the chat, and we can go further in depth. So as Eric just mentioned, active transportation is a state of California effort. They're in cycle 6 now as a funding source for projects like the Ventura Rail Trail. If you want more information on ATP cycle 6, there's a link in the mural board. We're going to go ahead and looks like John actually just pasted that into the chat. So if you want to dive into some more of this information on your own, you can click on that link, and then you can click on the link to the Caltrans program. Our project looks to close a gap or a deficiency in our current active transportation network on the east end, providing new safe connections to existing community connection places. And this is a grant program that is competitive, and it gives preference to projects that have large impact potential in disadvantaged communities. And so the Ventura Rail Trail project aims to benefit many pockets of disadvantaged communities along the Santa Paula branch line within Ventura city limits. And so just to recap, the Santa Paula branch line is a branch line that starts east of Piru and then goes through the urban areas, if we can call them that, the city areas of these places like Piru, Fillmore, Santa Paula, through Satacoy and Ventura, and then its terminus is the Metrolink station. The first section of this trail was built in 1991 in Fillmore. VCTC bought this rail line in 1995, and then in 1996, the Santa Paula branch line master plan was completed. Since then, phases of this within the urban areas of these incorporated cities have been built, but there's still linkages that remain unbuilt. Our portion within Ventura city limits is the last section, like urban section, to be built. So again, these are the sections, phase 1 and 2 of the Piru Trail that exists today, the Fillmore Trail that exists today, and then the Santa Paula Trail section that exists today. And then the Ventura Rail Trail proposed extent begins at the existing Metrolink station here. Sorry, my arrow is pointing in the wrong direction. This is the existing Metrolink station. And it stretches, the proposed rail trail stretches approximately 3.9 miles to a proposed trailhead just east of Wells in Saticoy. And this is a flyover. Eric, I'm gonna go ahead and try to slow down the settings before, let me pause it. So you can talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Brianne.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
we built this really fast, and it's really fast to fly through, so it's a little hard to narrate. But here you can see the whole Santa Paula branch line master plan proposed section. As Brianne mentioned, the sections in Piru, Fillmore, Santa Paula have been constructed to date, or at least portions of them. The large interstitial spaces in between the cities are not complete, but Ventura is the last of the urban sections. And so the proposed, just to kind of familiarize yourself, we're zooming in here on the city of Ventura. You can see the Santa Clara River there. And the trailhead in the start will start in the Montalvo area near the Metrolink station there, and which, yep, right in front of this there. And it will likely start on the north side of the railroad, and at some point have to cross to the southern. We've had a couple comments on that, where it'll pass through agricultural areas on the south side with still some residential. There's the large packing plant someone mentioned earlier, right there, cross Bristol in through this agricultural area on Bristol before Bristol turns into North Bank, just after Montgomery. Residential on both sides in the wide portion that's parallel to North Bank before it goes kind of in people's backyards, behind people's walls, from Saticoy to all the way to Brown Barranca in the east end. So before it crosses Wells into Saticoy. So that's kind of an overview of the trail segment. It'll be helpful for when we look at the exercises here in a minute. And we're kind of going through this for anybody who joined us late. If you've already seen this, hopefully it's helpful to see and familiarize yourselves with the trail segment again and its portion in this much larger piece. We've talked about this as kind of a very important next nexus or backbone trail for the city of Ventura.
Thanks for that, Eric. There's a couple comments in the chat. One was from John. He said, be sure to leave us your contact email addresses and maybe phone numbers if they haven't thought of something that they do want to share. I went ahead and put my email here at Pcld if anybody wants to reach out to me. I can go ahead and include those comments in our community engagement database. John from our office also just included the link to our community survey where you can also give more verbose feedback there. The next thing that we did was we did an activity that's called Where Do You Live? And we asked people to go ahead and drag and drop dots as to what portion of the city that they live in. John, can you drop the mural board link one more time, just in case anybody that has logged in late isn't on the mural board? These activities can happen again in the Google community form survey that has been provided in the chat. So if you're not able to use the mural board, you can give feedback of what area of Ventura that you live in that way. If you don't live in Ventura, but you want to give feedback about where you live, we still want to know where you're coming from tonight. So feel free to just somebody put their dot out here. I'm assuming that they live somewhere in Oxnard or maybe even further east. You can put it around the city limits of the direction that you live in. The ATP project goals vary. There's 6 of them that include increasing the proportion of trips accomplished by biking and walking, increasing the safety for mobility for non-motorized users, advancing the active transportation efforts of regional agencies to achieve greenhouse gas reduction goals. So you'll see in some of the sections that we provided some strategies of how we might achieve reducing greenhouse gas emissions, enhancing public health, including the reduction of childhood obesity through the use of programs like Safe Routes to School. Goal 5, ensure that disadvantaged communities fully share in the benefits of this program. So that includes new connections to disadvantaged communities. And number 6, provide a broad spectrum of projects to benefit many types of active transportation users. So the next activity that we did was we talked about community connection types and we wanting to know which community connections you can better reach through the implementation of something like the Ventura Rail Trail. So again, the Ventura Rail Trail starts at the existing Metrolink station and reaches 4 miles to the east to East Ventura, just past Wells. And so we've used iconography to represent different types of community connection points, including schools, libraries, places of worship, bus stations. Parks are in green, so those are parklands in green. And people went ahead and put stars on the map as to the locations that they would most likely use the rail trail to get to. And so you can also drop stars down here for the types of community connection points that you'd be interested in connecting through the rail trail. Lisa asked, what does Pcld stand for? Thanks, Lisa. We are Pacific Coast Land Design. It's something that we often do in design businesses is we use acronyms because they're just these long names, but we are a landscape architecture firm representing the city of Ventura, located in downtown Ventura. We've been in business for almost 40 years now, and we love serving our local community.
Lisa
Jeff?
Fox had a good point that the post offices don't have an icon. And to be honest, I'm not that familiar with where the post offices in East Ventura are. So that's a good one, an important one to note.
There's a post office in Satakoy area near Snapdragon.
Right.
By, let's see, like in this area in here. And then there's also a post office at like right by Boyna. I'm forgetting what that street is. Off Telegraph. So it's up in this region, up in here.
Jeff Morris he said Woodside Glen, he can't access the whiteboard app to put a star there. So
fantastic. Oh, there's a post office in Montalvo. Thanks, Marie.
Yep. So what we're really here, if you're new and just joining us on the whiteboard, on the Miro whiteboard, is to try and put a star in places that you really would use this trail, this 4-mile trail to connect to. And many people have said they want to use it for recreation, which is obviously very important, as a potential future connection to the beach with potential future build outs of other pieces. Really looking at this as a connection, the first kind of step or the next step in building out Ventura's active transportation network, and a very important one.
So next we talked about some of the design alternatives for the project, and these are just ideas that we came up for different sections within the project. So there's 4 areas that we looked at. We're calling them Section A, Section B, Section C, and Section D. And Eric, can we breeze through these quickly?
Yeah, we can real quick. We'll start with Section A for those that are still with us here. Section A is kind of the Montalvo area, where the condition is it's a little bit narrower of a railroad right of way, and residential is on the north side, and either industrial or agriculture is on the south side. So in these sections, we call these typical sections. What you're seeing here are potentially proposed trail alignments or features along the trail. They're not exhaustive. It's just meant to be kind of a picture of what a section of the trail could look like in this portion. So potentially in this section, looking at this 12-foot wide multi-use path with the separating fence. And one of the key kind of topics that's come up tonight is making sure there's lighting. So all of these are showing potential lighting along the trail as a way to enhance safety primarily. So through new solar powered lighting fixtures, that's more cost effective and less intrusive than it's ever been. It's a potential there. And also looking at ways to mitigate runoff through the use of bioswales. You're noticing, and you'll see in some of these other sections, you're not noticing any trees in this particular one. And that's because through this project, the portion of money that can be used for landscape improvements is somewhat limited. So really trying to target locations where trees and shade are provided and trying to create an experience through the use of trees rather than just providing trees everywhere is going to have to be a part of the solution. And so in the section A, a lot of the adjacent properties already have existing trees, and that trail segment is a little narrower. Section B, someone brought up a very good point earlier, and this is a section of the trail that follows Bristol. It connects the North Bank neighborhood to Montalvo with agriculture on both sides. And it's actually a portion of Bristol that's 2 lanes wide, and it doesn't have a sidewalk or a bike trail on it. Someone pointed out that they would use this trail to walk to the packing plant, a potential route to school, to work from the North Bank neighborhood or Cabrio Village or somewhere further east. So that's a really key important consideration in this, is that this becomes the really safe pedestrian bicycle area to offset Bristol Drive. In this location, we could look at providing intermittent trees with opportunities for rest nodes and trash receptacles, using those trees to provide shade, as you see in this option. Maybe the landscape palette looks more like a native wildflower mix along here, something that can be done cost effectively, but also work to add some beautification, some seasonal color to the area. And that's opposed to the second option for option B, which uses the trail alignments in the same place, but because Bristol doesn't have any curbs on it, it becomes a really interesting opportunity to mitigate stormwater runoff from both the trail and potentially Bristol Drive. Just different ways that space next to the trail could be used. The next section is section C. This is the section along North Bank, where North Bank, in between Montgomery and where North Bank kind of deviates from the railroad right away, about 2 blocks further east, 2 or 3 blocks further east. In this section, North Bank actually, Bristol turns into North Bank. North Bank's actually 5 lanes wide, 2 in each direction with a turn lane in the middle, parking on both sides. It's one of Ventura's largest street right-of-ways. And so right next to it is this large railroad right-of-way. So we're kind of doubling an infrastructure in this location, which means it's a potential great opportunity for something like a linear park. This first option is more like what you saw in B, where we could cover swaths of this with a drought-tolerant hydroseed mix, keeping the trail further to the west. But in the second option of this, you could see that just by moving the trail a little bit away from the railroad, we could create pockets and nodes along it for things like exercise stations. So treating this more like a recreation amenity in key locations. Also the ability to provide trees. And that's opposed to option 3 here, or variation 3, where maybe the trail meanders and there's shade nodes, providing more of that linear park usage here, or that someone mentioned trailheads, a pseudo kind of trailhead. A lot of that parking that you see on the right on North Bank in this stretch is unused on a daily basis. Most of the residential is on the south. So there's opportunities to kind of use this as an access point for the trail as well. And then lastly, in section D, this is kind of the backyard portion of the project, where east of where the project leaves North Bank Drive, kind of east of Pettit Avenue, it's largely in the backyards behind people's back walls. So this is a portion that's a long ways in between connection points with less visibility. So potentially adding items like emergency callback boxes and making sure that the lighting is there. Intermittent shade trees, providing good visibility through this portion are important. If you haven't already on those, feel free to leave comments. We'd love to hear what you like, what you don't like, put little dots next to the things you like on those. We're just kind of moving through this. For those who haven't been here, a lot of people have already been through this. The last of these 2 renderings shows what a bridge along the trail, potentially at Harmon Branca. We're gonna have to cross a couple of Brancas on this project in various ways. Harmon Branca is a very important connection. And so this rendering shows what one of the bridges look like.
At this time, I'd love to see if there's any other comments or questions.
Yeah, we covered a lot this time real fast, and love to open it up.
The last voting opportunity is to vote on your favorite design amenities for the proposed trail. And so this is an opportunity to drag the pink triangle over to your favorite amenity and then leave us comments as to if there's things that aren't on this list that you'd like to see on the rail trail, or if there's a particular reason why you like some of these things. Again, your feedback is really important to all of us. So we've included links in the chat of how you can provide additional feedback of what you think about the Ventura Rail Trail. We'd love to hear from you. So either through the long form survey, if you weren't able to use the mural board tonight, or we also have this short form survey, which is the pledge of support for the project. And that just gives you the opportunity to send us a note about your ideas for the project. Please reach out. This is the Ventura Rail Trail is the City of Ventura's residents project, and we want it to reflect all of your thoughts and ideas. Does anybody else on the team have any closing comments, sentiments?
I'll just chime in. I just thank Brianne and Eric for doing a great presentation, and John chiming in as well. You guys did a fantastic job. Thanks for putting this together. And just really excited. I think the time is right. You know, as Eric mentioned, we are in the middle of doing an active transportation plan. And one of the main things that we're finding out from the public is providing off-street opportunities for bikes and peds. That's really going to help people get out of their cars and be active. And so this fits right in with that. So the grant application is due June 15th. And we'll be submitting on that day, right at the last minute, probably. It's a pretty lengthy application. And I want to thank John, Merrill, and Lynn Consulting for putting it all together. And I think we usually hear in October-ish, I think, October, November, if we got the grant or not. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you guys updated on it. Also, lastly, it is going to council June 13th. Just as a consent item to let council know that we're are applying for this grant. So if you're interested in that, you can tune into that as well. So thank you. And I appreciate you all being here as well, of course.
Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. And thanks, John, too. We really appreciate working with the city and working with Lynn. It's been a fun project to be a part of. Transformational, I would say. This is a huge one for the city.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you.
Oh, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say thank you, Eric and Brianna, and the PCLD team as well.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to chime in real quick that even if we don't get this grant, there's been a lot of work done on this, and this could be used for other grants. So opportunities, and there's a lot out there these days. So all this information, this input that we're getting from the public can be used for other grant applications. So.
Yeah, the Santa Paula branch line master plan was such a visionary thing when it came out, you know, almost 30 years ago now. It's pretty crazy to think that it's taken this long for it to become as much as it is, and it's still got a ways to go, but this is such a huge step, and what a amazing just thought that would be, right? To have a trail that runs all the way from here to Piru along the 126 corridor.
And that's what, you know, the vision was by VCTC, the Ventura County Transportation Commission. So I want to thank them. And they've also are super duper supportive of this and are helping us out. I think I saw Amanda and Caitlin on here as well. So appreciate them coming in.
I'm going to read a couple comments that have filtered in here that I saw. I think it was Marie somewhere in here mentioned something about the Santa Paula or Sataquay Rail Depot. Yeah, a lot of interest in renovating the old Sataquay Depot. The county owns it, but it's the start of the project. So interestingly, we've had some conversations about that, and trying to find ways of working that into the grant application as a potential trailhead. It's difficult because of cross-jurisdictional issues there, but we've been engaged in that conversation. It was something that was kind of pointed out, and a really exciting opportunity, Marie. So you're on it there. What an amazing little gem that building is. It's on the historic register. I didn't know it existed before we started on this project, and it's such a just a unique little gem waiting to be restored. Yeah, Brianne will fly to where it is on the view for those who aren't.
Float way down.
Yeah.
As we close out here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention there's been some confusion. A lot of people have said that in the survey for the chat that it's the Ventura River Parkway Trail. But that's the link that it keeps taking them to that link. So, or the link keeps taking them to that survey.
The link to the community survey that I'm pasting in right now is definitely for the rail trail. The link that is going to be shared over the City of Ventura social media channels tomorrow, and it'll also be on the project like news flash that's shared information about tonight's meeting. Also has links to the rail trail community survey, and that's available in both English and in Spanish.
Yes, I don't know if there was a missed link in there or something, but it should be to the rail trail community survey. Should be the heading. Oh, the support form. Sorry. Thanks, Kathy. The support form at the end.
It might just be mislabeled. Let me double check. Thanks for bringing that to our attention.
So right here in the video is where that Santa Paula or the Sataquay rail depot is.
We can back it up a little bit.
So if I could, while you're loading that up, so you had mentioned cross-jurisdictional issues, and one of the things that we always run into in engineering is the engineering isn't always the hardest part. The hardest part sometimes are the institutional constraints of dealing with multiple agencies. So not only do we have the flood control district to deal with on this, we have VCTC, which I know VCTC has been on. VCTC has been very supportive of this project. Luckily, they own the rail in this area. There are other portions of the Santa Paula branch line trail, particularly from the Metrolink station to the ocean, that are not owned by VCTC necessarily. I believe that one actually is owned by either UP Railroad or one of the other railroads, and they tend to be very difficult to work with. And on top of that, you also have Amtrak on that one as well. With regard to crossing into Sataquay, this is another institutional constraint that we run into, is dealing with Caltrans. And anytime Caltrans is involved, there's a very separate set of approvals that need to go through. And on top of that, you've got the quality of the crossing. That is something to be considered as well. And the location of where to cross, where is the best place to cross. And so these are all things that are still very vague. It's not developed enough to put it in front of the public as to what those options or alternatives are yet. They will go to the public. Again, if this project is awarded and moves forward, it will go to the public as part of a process, a public process. But for right now, we can't substantiate any of these because there's so many moving pieces. But what we do have are several alternatives to try and get us to that finish line.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. That's a good point to bring up, John. I don't think a lot of people may realize that that Wells Road is the 118. So it's Caltrans's jurisdiction. So that's an important note to make there, as opposed to the other cross streets that are the city's jurisdiction. So it brings another player to the table, right?
I just wanted to clarify that the Pledge of Support survey is for the Ventura Rail Trail, not the Ventura River Trail. There was one typo in the survey. And I've reshared the link in the chat if anybody's interested in giving more feedback.
Thank you, Kathy, for bringing that to our attention. And apologies for the confusion. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to entertain it. We're here for another 10 minutes or so. Thank you again for taking your time out of this evening. It's been an important step in this project, and not the last time you'll be hearing about it either. So We're confident that the city will be a successful awardee. There's, what is it? Jeff, John, about $680 million on the table for this.
Yeah,
is what,
I think, yeah, 648 million is available in this cycle. I think it's the largest one, the largest cycle that they've had so far, as far as available funding goes.
So that helps, right? There's a bigger pot. It means that in competitive projects, maybe there's a better chance of getting a piece of it. So. And with that's a good point that you brought up too, Jeff, with you know, if it's unsuccessful with, you know, federal infrastructure bill monies moving down, the time for infrastructure is now, and this will not be the last opportunity that the city will have.
The survey will be open for how long, Brianne?
Yeah, so we're gonna leave the survey open for the rest of this week and all of next week before we pull down results for the application. And that information, again, it'll be posted on the City of Ventura's social media and website tomorrow. So everybody's got about a week and a little change to fill it out. So make sure to share the survey with other parties, neighbors, friends, community members that you know that are in support of this project, because everybody's input counts, and the support from the larger community is very compelling to the grantor.
Well,
yep.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm not seeing any other questions. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff, the city, John, for being here for our team. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Have a great night.
Don't end the meeting right away. I'm going to do a couple things.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I think we're good.
You stop the recording?
I haven't stopped it yet, but it will when I